Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Hello, so in a recent game I found myself in this position. My opponent had just played knight a4, attacking my bishop, and it didn't seem like there were very many good places for the bishop to go. If we look at all the candidate moves, that wouldn't make a lot of sense. That would be sort of unintelligent, defended, and so I thought maybe bringing the bishop to b6 and then just trading the knight for the bishop and undoubling the pawn. But then I saw, why don't I just sacrifice the bishop and capture the pawn on f2? Forcing a check, bringing the king out, and then getting a big attack on the king with the knight, rook, and queen. So I thought that was an extremely clever move. However, I was shocked when I did the analysis that Stockfish did not agree. And in fact, as you can see with the with the chess.com coach, that move it considers to be a straight up blunder. In fact, plus 3.6. So what is going on here? Now let's go back to the beginning of the game and start from the analysis. This game, it was a fairly short game. I thought I actually played pretty well. Let's go. All right, so my opponent played an Italian, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c4, beginning of the Italian. I decided to play the two knights defense, bringing out the other knight, and then they played the open two knights, Italian by d4, almost a very Scotchy looking move. So captures, and before we move any further, those of you who follow my channel might remember this setup. So last week I spoke in a video about defending against a Scotch gambit, and we can reach this position in the Scotch gambit. And very quickly to show you what that looks like. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, but d4 right away, captures, bishop comes out, Scotch gambit, and then the Du Bois-Reity defense. This is exactly the same position that we just saw before. So let's go back. So this was what happened in the game, but from the two knights Italian open. Now the opponent opted to capture the pawn, and if you remember from the previous video, that is not the best move. In this position, the opponent has two possible good moves. One is to short castles, or the best move, which is to move the pawn forward to e5. But they captured. I decided to bring a bishop out to c5, asking, what are they going to do? And they decide to keep on the rampage and take. And so I captured back. So potentially I thought this was okay because I am better developed. Being better developed is often very good. So they basically sacked their active piece. They bring out the other knight. I push pawn to d6, basically opening up the diagonal for my light square bishop. Short castles, and now my opponent makes probably the first blunder with playing rook to e1. So why is that a blunder? And Stockfish agrees that it's a blunder. Now the reason for that is, if you look at my setup, my goal is probably to target the pawn on f2. So got two pieces there, queen potentially can come out as well. And by moving the rook out, it leaves the defense only to the king, which is probably a bit risky with how weak that is. Now, in this game, I think Stockfish suggested that I should have taken advantage of that weakness, immediately moving the knight out, the opponent. Now, I thought about that, but I thought the opponent could potentially sort of block that move by just moving their rook forward to e2, or even better, developing their bishop to e3, defending that pawn. But in that setting, I can immediately bring queen to h4, threatening a mate in one. So that's what Stockfish reckoned. Here, I wanted to bring another attacker on f2 before declaring my hand, before showing that that's what I wanted to do with the attack. So what I actually ended up doing was bishop to e6, asking will they trade pieces, and given sort of the opponent's sort of I suppose fairly uh, you know, their sort of penchant for trading with the knights, I thought they would probably capture. I'll be able to take back with the pawn, opening up the f-file and allowing the rook to join the party. And that's exactly what happened, so I was very happy. And now we get to that opening position. Knight to a4, attacking the bishop. Let's slip feedback back on to see what Stockfish reckons. And of course here, I captured that pawn. Stockfish says, nope, blunder plus 3.6. Now, I here thought that this was a good move for me because surely the only good move for the opponent is to take the bishop with the king. Because if they didn't do that, I'm going to just take their rook the next turn. So if they take, then it looks like I should be able to have, a double check. So, double check, that's pretty cool, which means that the queen can't take the knight because of double check. This move doesn't seem possible, but it is possible. And from here, I thought surely the only logical move is for the king to retreat. Queen comes out, and happy days. And in fact, with my calculation, I thought that if the opponent plays inaccurately, I would definitely have a checkmate somewhere. And in fact, I could only the opponent could, from my calculation, could only avoid checkmate if they opted to whack that knight by trading it for their queen. And I thought, that would put me in a completely winning position. So when I did the analysis, I was very surprised to see Stockfish say that was a blunder. Why is it a blunder? Well, so that is the best move. So they had to cake. That is the best move for me. But still plus 3.6. Now let's look at the lines. So let's just move that arrow out of the way. So here, my opponent has only 3 candidate moves. The king can move back to g1, it could come to e2, or could move forward to g3. Now, psychologically, I thought that this was the only rational move. You look at that move, it just, so if queen goes to e2, it just looks ridiculous. It looks silly because that can just end up straight up taking. Rook can move forward, which now comes with check again. Then I could sort of either bring the queen out, bring the other rook in. So that I thought looked patently ridiculous as well. And this move, king to g3, marching in front of their defensive pawns into the attack. I actually didn't even calculate it. It just looks so ridiculous. It just wasn't part of my picture. But when you look at Stockfish, this is the only move that the opponent has that maintains their advantage. Now, these different numbers are because of sort of lower depth, and I've actually run the analysis all the way to about depth 35. And at depth 35, yep, it's about a little bit over plus 3.5, which is extraordinary. Somehow, the king in that position, immediately attacking the knight, is completely safe. In fact, the only move I have is to potentially, here, what does it reckon? It reckons moving the knight back to f2. Oh, moving the knight to f2 to move it out of the way, defended by the rook. So it's a really, really funny position here. Now, the other move, so to e2, yes, it is in fact bad. So at higher depth, that's worse than -3. And the interesting thing is that the sensible looking, human looking move, which is what my opponent actually played, here it says about -10, I think. Yep, but at higher depth, it's even worse than that. It goes all the way to -12. It's worse than -12. So it was a blunder, but only if the opponent would find king to g3. And I would argue that that is practically inhuman, that at least at the beginner intermediate level, it's an inhuman looking move. And in fact, king back to g1 is almost a surety at these level games, which I think makes that my original bishop sacrifice a psychological brilliancy, even if it is an objective blunder. Now, my next move, queen h4 as expected, and here my opponent actually makes a final blunder, doesn't sort of prevent mate in one, so mate in one. Good game, GG. There are two big takeaways from this game. One, if there are only a few possible moves, don't dismiss a move out of hand without calculating first. And two, psychological tactics are valid in games of chess against humans. I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching.